Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Q&Play, the show where I answer your questions in a rambling, unscripted format. The first question comes from ThatGirlLinn. How can I as a DM help my players to roleplay? I have a few players who I know would like to roleplay more, but are either too shy or don't know how to take initiative. I try to help with my NPCs, but it doesn't always help. Thank you so much for your great content. You're welcome. So, I also play with players that don't roleplay a lot, and I've basically just accepted that that's their style, and that's okay. Some games you're going to roleplay a lot in character, and some games you're just going to be doing a lot of third-person roleplay and a lot more combat. That's how my home game often goes. However, you and your players seem to want to roleplay, and as a DM, the way I often get more connected with my players in roleplay situations is through NPCs, but not just any NPCs that they specifically, really enjoy the presence of. When I was developing Shadow over Caruccio, which is a show that's going to come up in a second again, it was very important for the central NPC, Kalia Sulfero, to come across as likable to not just the players, but to the audience. But mainly, my first priority was making her likable to the players. She was central to the plot in a lot of ways, the primary quest giver, and therefore, if the players didn't like her, we would have a problem. So I clarified to the players, hey, is this a character that you'd be interested in? I loosely described her personality. Obviously, I didn't want to spoil everything, but I loosely described who she was, so the players could acclimate to her persona and roleplay with her, or me as her, better. And I think it really worked out because Kalia ended up being a great NPC in that game. You can take it a step further by specifically making NPCs that you think your players are going to like. My home game party loves himbos, lovable rogues, adorable naive types, and epic girl bosses of immense power. It's a thing in my games. I make a lot of those characters because I know my players like those characters and therefore are going to roleplay more naturally with these characters. Lean into what your party likes. Obviously, there are characters that you are going to want to make. I made all the NPCs for Shadow over Caruccio and Crown of Deceit, my new D&D show, in advance because those players are much more experienced with roleplay, and I'm pretty sure they'll be able to bounce off whatever I throw at them. That allows me a lot more flexibility and allows me to make characters that I'm really invested in. However, you can also lean into what your players already like. With my home game, where my players are a lot more loose with their roleplay, I lean into what they like so that we can roleplay more naturally. And honestly, it's not really a chip on my shoulder because I like these things too. I also like these characters. So honestly, it's a great way for me to roleplay with players that don't roleplay as much. Hope that helped you out, dude. Good luck in your games. Question from Miss Spectra. What would you consider your favorite homebrew magic item? I curate my homebrew magical items. Honestly, I don't have time to make items the vast majority of the time. However, I do have systems in my campaign that exist in my homebrew patch notes, which one of these days I'm going to go over, I promise. But obviously, if someone like Griffin Saddlebag is making a homebrew magical item for D&D 5th edition in general, it might not fit into my game. Also, while I really like Griffin's art and the art of the vast majority of D&D magical items, a lot of the time either A, it doesn't fit with the world that I'm building, or B, the art just isn't appealing to me, so sometimes I'll trade it out for something else. Thus arises my homebrew magic item card list, and I have a ton of these. Most of them are just taken from Griffin Saddlebag, art, effect, and all because, damn it, that guy makes some great items. But many of these just come from other places, some of them from official content, because even though I'm not super into most official magic items, there are some really awesome ones in there that I want to use. My favorite is a spoiler for Crown of Deceit, unfortunately. So I can't talk about it because the final episode of that show has not aired yet. However, since that campaign was pre-recorded in advance, I know exactly which magic item in this list is my downright favorite because it's really plot relevant to the show, and I think it's really cool. But I still want to answer your question, so I'm going to go through the rarities of my magic items and pick my favorite of each rarity. First up, at the uncommon tier, we have the Goblin Bamfer. This one comes from Griffin Saddlebag, though I'm pretty sure it's not called that in the original. Basically, this dagger allows you to teleport behind a target, and I love this effect. It works great as just a simple damage dealing effect, as it does extra force damage, but also works great for movement. I love items like this that don't just do extra damage, they do something on top of that, allowing you to get creative. My favorite of the rare tier has got to be the Earthbreaker, another Griffin Saddlebag masterpiece that allows you to do extra fire damage with your hits. However, there's a little bit more to it. you build energy in the hammer, and on the third turn, the hammer erupts into lava, releasing a volcanic storm, forcing a dex saving throw. I think this is so damn cool. So many items that I see in both homebrew and official is just, this deals extra fire damage. This deals extra poison damage. But this does extra fire damage, but with like an extra thing. A whole volcanic storm. I mean, come on. That is way, way cooler. And on top of that, it hurts your friends too, meaning that you kind of have to warn them, like, hey, this hammer's about to explode, get back! And then you can unleash the massive volcanic storm, allowing you to coordinate with your party. At lower levels, I think this could be a really cool item. Next up, the Shadow of Alak-Ul. With the perk Shaped in Darkness, it allows the user to transform the dust inside of this urn into a sword. But then you can speak the command word again to transform that sword into a shadow, like the creature, and have a minion. I love this as an epic magical item. At later levels, it can come in really clutch. And the shadow is not something to be messed with. Now, I do think it's significantly weaker against monsters as opposed to when it's going against players. However, I still think it's a really effective monster and a cool ally to have in combat. I like how thematic and neat this weapon is. Just having dust that turns into a magic sword of necrotic damage and having that dust turn into a minion, damn, that's cool. Finally, Nightmare Scream, which does have a cool effect. It allows you to spend superiority dice to deal extra necrotic damage and steal spell slots away from the enemy. However, the effect doesn't matter as much as the story of this weapon. Nightmare Scream, if you're looking at the art, it is made of bone. That's the bone of Vecna's avatar. Basically, in the homebrew world I've created, Vecna split his soul off into a few avatars so that he could continue to operate inside of the mortal plane when he was banished hundreds of years ago. One of those avatars, Cain Miva, was a big pain in the party's butt. They hate that guy. And when they finally killed him, they turned him into a sword, which is awesome. The sword is literally made of his broken, fused together bones. Doesn't get much more metal than that. It was the culmination of a super long campaign storyline, and it resulted in one of the party members, our rogue, getting a sword companion that essentially would just constantly yell at her all the time, which is just, it's a lot of fun. In case you can't tell, guys, loot is a big part of my game. I love loot. I love giving my players cool loot. Loot that's really thematic. It's a big part of the game for me. And yeah, that took forever, so let's move on to the next question. Next question from Vivienne Chaves. Hi, Crispy. Question about Shadow over Carconos. Did any of the players do something you totally didn't expect that rocked your plans? If so, how did you deal with it? Also, I absolutely love your live plays. You're a wonderful DM. Thank you so much. So, I'm gonna be honest. No, they did not really catch me off guard in any major ways, because the way I frame most of my shows is I have major choices happen at the end of the session so that I can have time to prep later on. I have things prepped in advance, like way in advance. I have set pieces in my mind, but all those set pieces are almost always things that the players really need to accomplish. And obviously, there are some barriers on what they can do. Like, Shadow over Carconos takes place in Carconos. You can't leave Carconos. Just like how in Curse of Strahd, you can't really just walk out of Barovia unless you just want to not play the adventure, you know? So, I don't really have any moments in the campaign where I went, oh crap, I did not plan for this at all, because usually I had some idea of what's going to happen, especially since the sessions are so short. It gives me a lot of in-between time to, like, do stuff. The players understood that going in. My home game is much more open. I always frame my campaigns as being very linear, but my home game is not linear by any means. The players do some crazy stuff that completely catches me off guard. It's just, I always have time to prep for it because they almost always do that crazy thing at the end of the session. And I'm really good at delaying the consequences until I can figure out what to do about the consequences. A great example of that would be when our monk shook the hand of Cain Miva, the avatar of Vecna I talked about earlier in the magic item talk. And yeah, that whole moment, that one little handshake, spiraled into a 40-session quest. Because, yeah, I mean, I felt like shaking Vecna's hand should have some consequence, and they were into the story, so I expanded it out a lot. Now, of course, that's my home game. In terms of my actual plays, Crown Deceit does have a moment where I didn't expect the players to do certain things. I won't talk about that, though, because it's a spoiler! Alright, next question. Question from Bolide Caruccio. Hi Crispy, I'm in the works of a D&Destiny one-shot. Do you have any suggestions of any kind to give? P.S. It's my first time DMing. Don't be afraid, because D&Destiny is just like Dungeons & Dragons. It's based on Dungeons & Dragons. It's a hack of Dungeons & Dragons, meaning learning D&Destiny is about as complicated as learning Dungeons & Dragons. So any hurdles that you'll face here, you'll probably face no matter what you do. So yeah, just be aware that you're going to face hurdles. It's going to be hard. Everyone's first game is tough. But when you fall, you just gotta get back up and keep going. Obviously, hopefully not fall literally, but when you make mistakes, just learn from them. It's not a big deal if you mess up, because you're brand new. In terms of D&Destiny specifically, I haven't ran it extensively. I looked through the book and did a review on it, which I really enjoyed doing that. I kind of wish my reviews did better, because I really did enjoy doing them, but at the end of the day, that's not in the cards for me, which isn't a big deal. You know, you guys like what you like, and that's okay with me. But in any case, D&Destiny, I reviewed it. I had fun with it. I do think the big thing is don't homebrew what's already there, okay? There's already a lot going on in that system. Learn it first, all right? As a guy who uses tons of house rules in homebrew, let that happen over the course of a while, especially when you're playing a hack. That's my number one advice. But actually, that's my number two advice. My number one advice, have fun with your friends. That's what matters most. Oh, and also use the Destiny soundtrack for battle music, because oh my god, it's so good. Question from Sarah Van Donsel. What makes a really good standout DM in your opinion? What kinds of habits or traits do you aim for in your own DMing? I think somebody who prioritizes the fun of both themselves and the players is really, really important. Somebody who knows that balance. Somebody who knows how to give and how to give to oneself. Because you as a DM, you need to have fun. You cannot run a game where you are not enjoying yourself, because it's going to eventually show through the cracks. I mean, honestly, it's going to quickly show some cracks in your game, because if you're not having a good time, it's going to just bleed into everything you're doing, and your players are going to notice. So make sure that you do things with your game that you enjoy. I love organization. Like, I spend hours just organizing Google Drive folders with tons of tokens and stat blocks and magic items, putting all my assets into neat color-coded folders. I love it. It brings me such joy. It's simple things like that that make me happy. I mean, it's an aspect of DMing that I think is really useful for starters, but the main reason I do that is because I like doing that. I like going onto my computer and organizing. It makes me feel good. I think the reason why tabletop and D&D discourse online annoys me more often than it doesn't is because so often it's about things that aren't really objective. We're enforcing our norms onto other people's games. And while there are things that I think are universal, hence why I do RPG horror stories, by the way, I think social respect and being nice to other people is something that everyone should do. But when it comes to actual, like, game things, it's very subjective as to what you're doing. I mean, guys, I get joy out of organizing a Google Drive folder for Dungeons & Dragons. I'm not exactly trying to say that that's the only way you can get joy, though. A good DM is someone who knows what their players like and what they like, and employs that in their games to make everyone at their table happy. To hell with what everyone else is telling you. To hell with other people telling you how to have fun. That includes me, by the way. If you ever hear me trying to tell you how to have fun at your table in the game sense, then yeah, feel free to not listen to me. Just do what is good for you and your friends. It's all that matters. Question from Chaotic Voices. Will you ever do a series dedicated to RPG win/glory stories about great, cool, or funny things that happened? Probably not. Not gonna lie. So the reason is a couple-fold. Obviously, the first reason, and this isn't the primary reason, but is a reason I want to bring up because I don't want to pretend like this isn't a factor. Views matter on YouTube, and you guys really like horror stories. That's why a lot of you guys are here. I obviously make other things, both for you guys, but also for myself. I like making my actual plays. I like making D&D advice videos. I love making my podcast. However, objectively, I need to continue making RPG horror stories just from a fundamental level because you guys like them too. You guys subscribe for those, and I'm going to continue making them. The other reason is, guys, I love making all my other content, but you don't understand. I love making RPG horror stories. Like, seriously, it is amazing. I love that I get to do that for a living. Talking about these stories and talking through the issues that happened and just reacting to the crazy stuff that went down in the stories, it is so fun. I don't know if you can tell, but I don't vet the stories in advance. Like, obviously I read the TLDR and I read the title, but I don't read the full story until I'm recording. That's why so often you'll hear like Crispy getting broken or whatever, where I go silent from shock. That's not me acting. That's legit. I'm actually reacting to the story because I don't read them in advance. I want to keep my reactions genuine, which isn't hard because I'm genuinely having a really good time reading these stories. Also, with RPG horror stories, I have a lot of fun with the edits. Like, for a long time, I was thinking in my head that editing my actual plays, well, it takes forever. But actually, it doesn't. My average editing time for a podcast for my actual play is about 4 hours. RPG Horror Stories is 4 to 5 hours. If anything, RPG Horror Stories sometimes takes longer. But here's the thing, I don't notice because RPG Horror Stories is so much fun to edit. The whole creative process of doing those videos is great. I love it. And so I can't really see Glory Stories taking that same joy. I've tried reading Glory Stories in private and I just don't have as much fun with it. And even though maybe one day I'll do it, right now I'm not interested. I love doing horror stories, and since you guys love it too, I'm gonna continue. To me, it's a simple premise. Question from some random dude. Hi, asking for a friend who's interested in becoming a DM. Do you base creature or enemy encounter challenge ratings equal to the level of the player characters? How do you make balanced encounters? Alright, so often challenge rating is the first step for me. It's the ballpark. I look at challenge rating to determine loosely how balanced an enemy is going to be, but then I just kind of guess from there. It's really more of a feeling at this point. I don't know how to describe it. Now, I will say, at the base here, I do want to bring up that I'm not using official monsters. I only use Matt Colville's action-oriented monster design philosophy now from Flea Mortals. I have said it many times, and I'm not joking. That is not a joke. That's not me just trying to plug. It's me being serious. It's all I've ever used. Just listen to my actual plays, and you'll see I'm telling the truth. But in any case, encounter balance really depends on what players you have. Like, how experienced are they? How many of them are there? What's their party comp? Really, you need experience with what they can handle. I have been playing with my party for years now. I am very experienced with their playstyle in combat. Also, with these specific characters, I've been playing with them for 50 sessions. So I'm pretty aware of what they can handle and what they can't handle. Recently, they went up against a pirate captain who had an ability to inflict points of exhaustion, as well as lots of other fire-based powers. And I had an inkling that they could lose this fight. This was a fight that I was thinking in my head, yeah, this could realistically be lost. And guess what? It was lost. I was right. Now, of course, it was possible for them to win, but I knew that it would be hard, and it was hard. And it was really just a feeling. You need experience with how your players play, what they're good at countering, and what they're bad at countering, and then base your encounter design from there. Are they good at doing tons of single target damage? Can they do AoE effects? How many healing spells do they have? How tactical are they in combat? This comes with experience. Don't worry too much about having strict and super potent encounter balance at the offset, because really, I think you can just use challenge rating and reading of monster abilities to determine what's going to be good for your players. Obviously, it's a ballpark. You're not going to get perfect all the time, but that's okay. You start with the ballpark, and then you get better from there. All right, great questions, guys. That's going to be it for today's episode of Q&Play. If you guys enjoyed, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then you can check out our RPG horror story series, where we talk about the best, the worst of Dungeons & Dragons. And while you're there in the cards, subscribe to Crispy's Tavern to get more of our content right as it comes out. And finally, if you want to leave your own questions or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment, "Invaders must die," to reference the game I'm playing in the background and to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And that's like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.